This is the best time to be a Pakistani. I honestly believe that, and that is why I am here. And that is why I am here. When I say it's the best time to be a Pakistani, that doesn't mean it's an easy time to be a Pakistani. This is in fact a better time to be a Pakistani than even 1947 in my opinion. Because your being a Pakistani can mean something. Not because it is easy, but precisely because this is a difficult time. Not because it is easy, but precisely because this is a time that demands change, that needs change, and that needs change that only Pakistanis can bring. And that is why I'm here. I actually had a real cool thing happening up on the screen there which you won't see, but I don't want to talk about rethinking Pakistan. I want to talk about thinking Pakistan. That is what the challenge is. To think about Pakistan again. Not to remake it in some new way, but to revive it in the glory of the original idea. And to refine that idea, to revive that idea, and to put new life into that idea that was always Pakistan. And that idea is embedded in individual Pakistanis. And that is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about three things in particular. If you are indeed going to rethink Pakistan, that means you'll have to rethink first how you think about the world. Having said what I've already said, I'll spend the first half of my talk actually not talking about Pakistan. Because I think the idea of Pakistan has to do with the idea of how Pakistan links with the rest of the world. So three things. One, we have to rethink how we think about the rest of the world. Two, we have to rethink how we think of the challenges. Everyone seems to know what the great challenge of this country is. And I invite you and I challenge you to rethink about that challenge. I do not think it is politics. I do not think it is corruption. I do not even think it is economic slowdown. I invite you to rethink what the great challenge before this country is. And the third thing is what the first speaker had also said. If you are to rethink Pakistan, then you will have to rethink you. You will have to rethink yourself. And you will have to rethink the way my grandmother used to rethink about things. She used to say, if you point one finger at someone else, at least three fingers point back at you. And that is what rethinking yourself in your place in Pakistan means. Let me go through those things in fairly quick order. I'll talk about those two in a slightly different format because the priorities are different, but I'll tell those three stories the way they are. I know professors are sometimes supposed to do silly things. I will do a silly thing. Bear with me. I want you to imagine. I want you to rethink where you are. Imagine for a moment that you are not here at TEDxMargalla. Imagine for a moment, and I want you to think global, not Pakistan for the moment. Imagine for a moment you are not at TEDxMargalla. Imagine for a moment that you are not in Islamabad. Imagine for a moment you are not even in Pakistan. Actually, imagine you are not even on this planet. Imagine you are sitting on some other planet. Choose your planet. There used to be 9, I think, now there are 8, and one of them is doing very well. Choose your planet, and you're sitting there, and you're looking down on this planet called Earth. And you have been assigned by the LUMS of that planet to write an assignment in 3 pages or less about this country called Earth. If someone was looking at this planet from up above and wrote about it as, the United Nations write these country reports, this country is like that, this country is like that, what would our country, Earth, be describing? Because we keep talking about the global movement, globalization, global climate change, all that, Hakuna Matata. What is our home, the planet Earth? I would posit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if indeed, play with me, if indeed you thought of the planet as if it was a country, you would immediately come to the conclusion that you live on an extremely poor country. You live in a country where 2 billion people live on less than $1 a day. You live in a country where 1 billion people lives on less than $2 a day. $2.50 a day. It used to be $2 a day, but the dollar ain't what it used to be. So they changed it to 2.5. You would come to the conclusion that you are not only living in a poor country, you are living in a divided country. You'll start recognizing this country in a minute. The country Earth. A divided country where 80% of its resources are controlled by 20% of its people, where 80% of its people live on the remaining 20% of its resources. I'm not talking rich country, poor country. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking rich person, poor person. There's the first world country called Islamabad, and it's sitting here. There's a third world country called Islamabad. It's sitting about 2.5 miles that direction. The same was true for Boston, the same is true for New York. I'm not talking rich country, poor country, I'm talking rich person, poor person. You will find that your home, Earth, is not just poor and divided, it is a degraded country. It's a degraded country where the water ain't worth drinking, where the air isn't worth breathing, where the land is degraded, where the forest is denuded, where the climate is changing, where the seas are rising. You will come to the conclusion it's an environmentally degraded country you live in. You will come to the conclusion that it is not just environmentally degraded, but you live in an insecure country. Insecure not just because of silly and needless wars. That's the least of our insecurity. Insecure because of food insecurity and water insecurity and human insecurity, insecurity of every form. You will come to the conclusion that you live in a country that is poor, that is divided, that is insecure, that is degraded, that is badly governed. I used to joke when I was teaching in the US that if you saw how the United Nations is governed, how we govern the planet, even Pakistan looks like a case of good governance. Maybe not. You would come to the conclusion, therefore, that you live in an unsafe country. If indeed the US State Department had a travel advisory on the planet Earth, it would be to catch the first rocket ship out of it. The problem is there isn't anywhere to go. By the same criteria they use, I'm not joking, by the very criteria they use, our planet is not a place fit for living. Why am I doing this to all of you wonderful people at this point? I do not wish to depress you. In fact, I am an optimist. But I want to make the point that we live on a third world planet. Indeed, we are a third world country in a third world planet. And that is a challenge well beyond the challenge of rethinking Pakistan. Because until we figure out our place on this third world planet, we will not be able to think about our place in Pakistan. Why do I mean that? Let me give you one lesson of what it means to live on a third world planet when you are in Pakistan. I don't know how well you can see this. Can anyone guess what the picture in the background is? Sami? Let me give you a close-up. No. Anyone else?
Houses.
Houses. Mouses, but that's mice, maybe. But not, not houses. Let me give you a closer view of that. That picture that you just saw is the picture of 426,000 used cell phones. The number of cell phones retired in the United States every year. Why am I telling you statistics about the United States when we are rethinking Pakistan? Because that statistics determines the economy of Vice Chancellor Lahore. Have you ever wondered why you can get all those cell phones that cheap? Because there are entire shiploads of junk phones, junk screens, junk computers that come to lay waste in developing countries like Pakistan. In many ways it's a very good thing because we can then afford to reuse them. Reuse is a good idea. But the point I'm making is the following. The point I'm making is the one that's up there. We cannot afford to sit out of the global moment. And I do in fact think that part of rethinking Pakistan is to rejoin the global moment. We are so consumed. We are so very anxious to make the world and everyone around us feel bad for our state. We are so convincing at telling people how bad we are that we are standing out of one of the greatest global moments in human history. And that, I think, is a tragedy. Let me move from here to the global to a slightly even more global issue. So I started with the universe, I'm going to go to a planet and then I'll come to Pakistan. I want to just show a few slides about climate change, which is the issue that I work on. And I will posit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the future of this country, just like the future of this world, might actually be defined far more by issues like this than the issues that are being talked about on television channels right now. I'm not going to go into a detailed thing about this. I do that for a living. Climate change, every Pakistani understands climate change. Climate change is greenhouse warming. Greenhouse warming is what happens to your car when you leave it in the sun with all the windows up. When you come in, the car is very, very hot. That's what's happening to the planet. That's as simple as that. I won't go into the details. We know that it is happening. Just look at the graph. We know from the science that it is happening, but that the important point for countries like Pakistan is we know that its impacts are not just on carbon, it's on food, it's on water, it's on ecosystem, it's on health. It's on the things that you and I call development. That's why I think it's one of the big issues. We do not know exactly how it will pan out. That's why those squares are blurred. And that's bad news. That means we are in for a lot of surprises. Surprise floods, surprise disease, so on and so forth. But we do know that what it does is it exacerbates existing problems. Every problem becomes bigger than it was. And that is why countries like Pakistan should be thinking about it, and you and I should be thinking about it. We know that South Asia is amongst the highest at-risk places. We know from the dark spotted there that within South Asia, Pakistan is amongst the highest at risk. The problem is we still think of climate and environment in terms of pictures like this. And what we need to do as we rethink Pakistan is to change these pictures and turn them into pictures that we can recognize. Because that's what is actually. Here is what it means. Before I tell you that, anyone wants to guess what this picture means? Samir, another shot? Cell phones. That one is gone. That one is gone. This picture is the close-up. This picture, sometimes you have to get closer to a problem before you see the big pictures. And that's what I'm trying to do. This picture is a close-up of 2 million plastic beverage bottles. The number used in the United States every 5 minutes. I've been asking my friends at LUMS to calculate the number for Pakistan. I don't think it's going to be a pretty number either. The point is not about plastic bottles. The point is when you look closely at issues like climate change, you rethink what it means for you and your children. Here is what it means for countries like Pakistan. Most importantly, it means water stress. When we think of climate till now, we've been thinking of carbon and energy. I'll come to that in a minute. But climate impacts are really about water. If any of you is feeling hot and thirsty, think water. If you think about the impact of climate, it's mostly about water. What is it? Water rising, sea level rise, water melting, glaciers, water disappearing, drought, water falling from the sky like no one's business, extreme events. It's all about water. Why is water important? Let me give you an issue, and let me also say why this is not just about development, this is about real security. Real security, because security is not about country, security is about people. Development is about whether I and you feel secure in our livelihoods. And here is where water comes in. I wrote a book some years ago on human security in South Asia. One of my most telling statistics from it back of the end of the calculations. 60 years of constant conflict between India and Pakistan. Not 1, 2, 3 wars. 60 years of constant conflict between India and Pakistan. Total number of Indians killed by Pakistan in 60 years of constant conflict is less than the number of children only who die of dirty water only in New Delhi only in 1 year only. The exact same number is true on the Pakistan side for Karachi. Here is my problem with this number. And here is why I think about the environment rather than about war. If you are the mother of one of these kids, whether the kid died in New Delhi or in Karachi, your kid is no less dead whether she dies at the wrong end of a gun or the wrong end of a tag. And yet, as scholars, as professors, as journalists, as individuals, we think of one death as a national calamity. Here's my problem. 20 years of teaching international relations. I have no idea what to do about the climate. I know exactly what to do about the water. $18.63 is the cost of saving one life because of drinking water. I won't step on the other ones because they are evident. But the point I want to make is, once you start drawing the dots, once you start drawing the connections, you have to rethink a lot of things if you want to get it beyond the slogan. As soon as you have water stress, you have food stress. Won't even go into that, it's so obvious. As soon as that happens, even before that, energy stress, that's something every Pakistani knows about. I do not need to go into it again. You think this load shedding is bad, think about more energy stress. Another, one of my most telling concerns, especially now that I live in Lahore, is disease stress. I've been working on dengue for many years, but not for the reason that we talk about it here today. But because there is a debate within the environmental crowd that why is dengue moving northwards? Turns out the mosquito might actually be smarter than man. Might actually be adapting to some of these climate things before we do. Might also be that we are traveling more. But the point is, things change when the climate changes. Disaster risk we all know about. Ecosystem degradation is obvious. The last thing I want to point out, migration. What happens when the climate changes? 2/3 of the world's people's livelihoods, their check, depends on a service from nature. Whether it is growing food or livestock or something else. 2/3 of the world's people. The climate changes, their livelihood changes, they move from somewhere else. You want to see this, go to Bangladesh and the Sundarbans. They're already moving from there to Dhaka. Probably from Dhaka to Calcutta, from Calcutta to Boston. You will not stop them. You will not stop them from the mangroves in Karachi either. And you will have another wave of migration. So the point is, if we are going to rethink, then let's really rethink bold. Let's really rethink big. I've taken too much time, but here is the point I want to make. If you want to think about development, think what development is. For years I've been teaching about it and pointing out that development means dignity. Development is not GDP. Development is not growth. Development is dignity. Development is me knowing that from my skill, from my capability, I shall get a livelihood, and that livelihood shall give me dignity. When we worry about corruption because it takes away my dignity from me. That to get past a line, I have to give someone something, rather than just follow through. It is the dignity, the loss of dignity, that we see manifesting itself as a lack of development. Similarly, development is about insecurity. Insecurity in all the terms that I talked about. Here is the point that I want to make about it, and I'll take just a minute in doing that. We need to go back and think about the greats that this country itself has produced, that have thought about these things. And you see 3 pictures up there, 3 giants. I could have fit 6, I could have fit 8. Because giants are all around us. It is we who have failed to recognize them. And what you see there is Dr. Abdul Salam. What you see there is Maulana Abdul. What you see there is the legacy of the Unaki pilot project. And what you see there is a legacy that we should be proud of. A legacy of change that comes from ideas, the idea of tech. A legacy of change that comes from empowerment of people. A legacy of change that comes from sharing. But it's not just these giants who have produced this. In fact, all of you have been producing change without knowing it. Without taking a minute to pat yourself on the back. And the example I give you is of the floods 2 years ago. And I'm not doing it in the slogan form. Something very interesting happened. One of the greatest floods in history happened. If you look at that map, what I've done is I've taken the area of the flood, which is the yellow line, and I've superimposed it on the map of the United States, just to give you a sense of how big it was. It goes from up in Vermont to down in Florida. If you take the same area of the flood and superimpose it, this time on a map of Japan, it covers all of the country. If you superimpose the same area of the flood over a map of Europe, it covers it from Denmark at one end to Spain at the other. The point I'm making is very interesting. We had this great flood, and 2 years later we find that damage was not as big as everyone was afraid of. Very good, thank you. Very, very good. I'm very, very glad. Still, I also want to say, a lot of damage did happen. Not as great as we were expecting or fearing. Why was that? When we talk about it, we use this word of a word without meaning called resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is people coming up and doing action themselves to halt the problem. That is rethinking development. That is rethinking Pakistan. And in fact, we've seen this happen before, and we do not need only giants to do it. If only you and I were to do again, and each day, what we have in fact done before. The flood is only one example. The earthquake, in fact, might be another example. Let me go to the legacy of another great Pakistani doctor. What is development? For 20 years, I taught this in the United States, and my students wouldn't understand this, but I would still use the Punjabi version from them. What is development? Development is the answer to the question, ki aal hai? When I ask you, kya haal hai? You don't tell me your GDP. You don't tell me a growth rate. You don't tell me a Gini coefficient. You say, my son is sick. I hope your son is not sick. You say, I read a good book. You say, I saw a great movie. You say, I lost my job. That is what development is. Development is the honest answer you get when you ask people how they are doing. And from that came the concept that Dr. Mahbub had brought of human development. And human development is the idea that it's health, wealth, knowledge. That's what development is. Now let's see how we get there. Let's see how we get there. That in fact is development on this index called human development. Pakistan is 145 out of 193 countries. Not very good. It's kind of lingering there for a very, very long time. But please bring out your calculators. You'll have to do a pop quiz in a minute. India is 154, Bangladesh 146, Sri Lanka doing much better at 97. Right? So that's our pair. I'll come to in a minute. Over the years, Pakistan has gone up, not by very much. Every country should be going up. Countries should be going up by much faster. So not much good news there, but at least it's not becoming bad. Pakistan's total HDI score, this is where you use your calculators, please, is 0.504. Here is the simple math of it. 1 is perfect, 0 is absolutely bad. The closer you are to 1, the better you are doing. So Pakistan is 0.504. As I said, it's composed of 3 sub-indices: health, wealth, knowledge. Let's look at how Pakistan is doing in that. On health, we are 0.7. On wealth, we are 0.46. On knowledge, we are 0.38. On average, we are 0.504. If you were a quant, and some of you may be, and you want that number to go up, which number would you change?
Knowledge.
Which number of the 3, if you were a policy person, is the easiest and quickest to change? Knowledge. And there lies the answer. That is the level that changes every other number on that. And the good news is that education is the most happening sector in Pakistan today. And I stand here as I wrap up to tell you that in fact there are great things happening in the education area. And great things happening in the education area. I'll talk about LUMS for a minute, but that's not the issue. It's happening everywhere. The best thing happening in the knowledge area is that parents and kids are ready to invest in good education. That is why even your poorest person actually spends far more on getting their children good education than they used to. That is why kids sit there and cheat, because they've really figured out that the passport to success is getting the right degree. We need to change the cheating part. But everything else is in the right direction. Numbers count, as you might have noticed. Let me throw a lot of numbers at you, and I won't talk about all of them. These are just some numbers about LUMS. I could tell you many, many numbers about LUMS. I could tell you that we as a university gave 253 million rupees, 253 million rupees in financial aid this year. I could tell you, that's what I want you to think about. I could tell you that we have 190 plus faculty. I could tell you that we have given 1.9 billion rupees in financial aid over 5 years. I could tell you that 11% of our students are in our NOP program, which means they are kids from, on average, households of less than 20 to 25,000 rupees a month. Think about what that gets you. Those kids come, the university gives them a full coverage. They go out, what do? Last year, our highest paid undergrad was one of our NOP students. Comes in from a household of less than 20,000 rupees a month. Goes out, starting salary 78,000 rupees a month. That's value to the. But that's also not the number I want to talk about. I can talk to you about all these numbers. I can talk to you about how many great degrees are happening. I can tell you about how 8 of our undergraduates this year from our School of Science, before they have graduated, including an NOP student, have received a fully paid direct admission to a PhD in literally the top universities in the world, at Oxford, at Harvard, at Urbana-Champaign, at Dartmouth. But all of these numbers are important, but they lead to the one number that is more important than all of the above. The one number that drives me individually, the one number I hope drives LUMS, and the one number that I hope drives you. More important than all these numbers is the number 1. Because the 1 is you, and the 1 is me, and the 1 is someone who takes that action and says, I'm not going to wait for someone else to bring about the change. I'm going to be that change.